All right, ready to dive into this AI stuff.
Yeah, you weren't kidding. This is a lot of, let's just say, food for thought, right?
Right. So like AI is everywhere and everybody's talking about it, but is it really all that or are people just getting like swept up in the hype?
That's a big part of what we're going to try to figure out today, right? We'll dig into all this, see what's real, what's maybe a bit exaggerated.
Oh, it's pure science fiction. Like our robot's going to be taking our orders at the coffee shop next week?
Well, I'm not placing any bets on that as yet. But look, these articles you've given me, they don't hold back on the potential downsides. And some of this stuff is, let's just say it gives you pause.
Okay, yeah, I did get that vibe from some of them, like that one about Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, quitting Google because he's worried about his own creation.
Yeah.
That's got to make you think twice, right?
Right. If Hinton's concerned, maybe we should be too. So let's unpack this a bit. What are some of the biggest red flags that jumped out at you from these articles?
Honestly, the thing that always hits me first with this stuff is the whole jobs question. A robot's going to take everyone's jobs.
Well, it's not quite that simple, right?
Oh, I know. It's never that simple. But this one article had this quote from, I think his name was Martin Ford, and he was saying, even those like traditionally stable, lower wage jobs are at risk now. That's kind of scary, isn't it?
It's definitely a shift. And it's not just about losing jobs altogether, but the need for completely new skill sets to thrive in a world where AI is, everywhere.
Exactly. So it's not enough to just be good at what you do now. You got to be thinking about what skills you'll need 5, 10 years down the line when AI might be doing part of your job for you, or all of it maybe.
That's what we need to be talking about more. Because honestly, no one has a crystal ball, right?
Okay, so we've got the job market potentially being turned upside down. What else? What are some of the other big concerns about AI that these articles bring up?
Well, this is where things get a little more intense. We're talking about the potential for AI to be used for, shall we say, less than ethical purposes.
Like what? Give me an example.
Think autonomous weapons systems, for one. AI making life or death decisions without any human intervention.
Whoa, that's some scary stuff. Like straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, but the thing is, this isn't sci-fi anymore, right? This is technology that's being developed now, and it has some really heavy implications.
Okay, autonomous weapons, got it.
Yeah.
What else?
Social manipulation on a massive scale. Think about how social media algorithms already target us with ads and content. Now imagine that on steroids, driven by even more powerful AI.
So you're saying AI could be used to manipulate what we see, what we believe, even how we vote?
Potentially, yes, and on a much larger and more sophisticated scale than anything we've seen before. It's a whole new level of information warfare.
Okay, now I'm really starting to see why those articles had you a little freaked out. So where do we even begin to tackle these issues? I mean, it feels like we're talking about some seriously powerful forces here.
Well, the first step is understanding the more insidious dangers that often fly under the radar, the stuff that's not always making headlines.
Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. What are these hidden dangers of AI we should be aware of? Okay, hidden dangers. You've officially piqued my curiosity. What's lurking beneath the surface of all this AI advancement?
Well, it's something that pops up again and again in these articles, and it's honestly one of the biggest challenges when we talk about AI. Bias.
Bias, huh?
Yeah.
So you're talking about like those AI image generators that always seem to think a CEO has to be a man in a suit.
Well, that's one example. And sure, those stereotypes are a problem. But we're talking about something that goes way deeper than that. We're talking about bias baked into the algorithms themselves, often in ways that are really hard to spot.
Baked in? What do you mean?
These AI systems, they learn from the data we feed them, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that data, well, it reflects the biases that already exist in our world. So you end up with these AI systems making decisions based on, let's just say, a flawed understanding of the world.
Okay, so it's like even if the AI itself isn't intentionally biased, it can still end up perpetuating those biases because of the data it's been trained on.
Exactly. And that's the scary part. We're talking about these systems being used for things like loan applications, job interviews, even in some cases, criminal justice. And if those systems are inherently biased,
we end up with a whole new level of unfairness.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, garbage in, garbage out, right? Except in this case, the garbage out could mean someone doesn't get a job, or worse.
You got it. And it's even tougher to combat because of that whole black box issue.
Right, because even the people who create these AI systems, sometimes they don't even fully understand how the AI is making its decisions. It's all just like algorithms doing their thing.
That makes it incredibly difficult to go in and fix those biases, even if you can identify them in the first place.
So we've got these potentially biased AI systems making decisions that have real-world consequences for people's lives. What can we even do about that?
Well, it starts with awareness, right? We need to demand more transparency from the companies and organizations developing these systems. Ask the tough questions. What data are you using? How are you addressing bias in your algorithms?
So basically, don't just assume AI is inherently objective.
Exactly. It's only as good as the data it's trained on, and right now that data often comes with a lot of baggage. And beyond just asking questions, we need more diversity in the field itself.
More diversity. You mean like making sure the people building these AI systems represent a wider range of backgrounds and perspectives?
Precisely. Because if everyone designing these technologies comes from the same background with the same worldview, well, that's going to be reflected in the technology they create. It's not rocket science.
More voices, more viewpoints at the table. That makes a lot of sense.
And on top of that, we need some ground rules, ethical guidelines and regulations for how AI is developed and used.
So like actual laws and regulations specifically for AI. Because right now it feels like it's the Wild West out there.
That's a good way to put it. It's a rapidly evolving field and the laws often lag behind. But if we want to ensure that AI is used responsibly and ethically, we need those guardrails in place.
So we've got bias, we've got transparency, and we've got the need for regulation. Anything else we should be worried about? Or can I start applying for that off-the-grid cabin in the woods now?
Well, there's one more thing. We've talked about AI's potential to manipulate what we see and believe online, but what about its potential to be used for surveillance?
Oh boy, here we go.
I know, right? But it's something these articles bring up a lot, and for good reason. Facial recognition, predictive policing, even just tracking our movements and online activity, it's all happening, and it's all powered by AI.
Yeah, that's definitely a bit creepy. But is it really that widespread? I mean, I know we've all heard the stories about China using facial recognition everywhere.
It's not just China. A lot of governments are using, or at least exploring, these technologies, and as they become more advanced and more accessible, the potential for misuse is huge.
Okay, you've officially creeped me out now.
I'm not done yet. Remember that whole ChatGPT thing a few months back?
You mean when people were saying they could see other people's chat history? Yeah, that was a mess.
It was a bug, right? But it highlighted how vulnerable our data can be in these systems. And that was an accident. Imagine if someone intentionally exploited those vulnerabilities for surveillance.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting some serious Black Mirror vibes now. So we've got biased AI, potential for manipulation, lack of transparency, and now mass surveillance. Honestly, this is a lot to process. What are we supposed to do with all of this?
I get it. It can feel overwhelming. But the good news is, it's not all doom and gloom. There are things we can do.
Okay, because I could really use a little bit of hope right now. What's the good news? Okay, because I could really use a little bit of hope right now. What's the good news?
Well, maybe hope is a strong word, but it's not all doom and gloom, right? The point isn't that AI is inherently bad, it's that we need to be really smart about how we use it.
So less robots are going to take over, more let's make sure AI works for us, not the other way around.
Exactly. And that starts with understanding the risks, which we've talked about, but it also means exploring solutions, right? And some of these articles actually had some good ideas on that front.
All right, I'm listening. What can we actually do about all this?
Well, for starters, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Engage in the conversation about AI ethics, about bias, about regulation.
So don't just accept whatever new AI gadget comes along as inherently good.
Right. Ask. What data are you using? How are you addressing bias? What are you doing to protect my privacy? Those are things everyone should be asking.
Okay, so make some noise, be an informed consumer. What else?
Support the organizations out there that are pushing for more transparency in AI, more accountability. Write to your elected officials. Tell them this stuff matters to you.
Got it. Raise awareness, make our voices heard. What about the actual tech itself? Can that be changed?
Absolutely. We already talked about diversity, and that is huge. We need more people from different backgrounds, different perspectives involved in creating this technology.
So change who's building the tech to change the tech itself.
Exactly. And honestly, it sounds simple, but even just learning more about how AI works can make a difference. The more people understand this stuff, the better equipped they'll be to spot the problems.
Knowledge is power, right? But what about the regulations? That feels like a whole other beast.
Yeah, it's not easy, but there are people working on it. Some of these articles talked about legal experts, ethicists, people who are really trying to come up with guidelines for ethical AI development. They're even working directly with tech companies to try to build that into the process from the ground up.
So it's not just about waiting for the government to catch up. It's about working within the industry to try to steer things in the right direction.
That's the idea. And honestly, that might be our best bet right now because let's face it, technology moves fast. Waiting for governments to pass laws, sometimes that feels like trying to catch a runaway train.
That's for sure. All right, we've covered a lot of ground here, talked about the risks, talked about potential solutions. What's the main thing you hope people take away from all this?
Don't feel powerless. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by this stuff, like it's all inevitable. But that's not true. We have a say in how this technology develops. But it takes being informed, being engaged, being willing to speak up.
I like that. Not giving in to the fear, but also not being afraid to ask the tough questions.
Exactly. This isn't about being afraid of technology. It's about making sure it's used for good.
That's a future worth fighting for. Well, this has been quite the deep dive. We explored the dark side of AI, learned about algorithms, and somehow managed to come out the other side feeling, I don't know, maybe a little more hopeful.
And with the to-do list, don't forget about those action items we talked about.
Right. Listeners, time to put on your advocate hats and make some noise. The future of AI might depend on it. And on that note, we'll catch you next time for another deep dive. Until then, stay curious.